provide you with some time for you to plan a walk of your own. We'll let you know what the 30-day walking curriculum challenge is, and then we'll take some questions and answers at the end, but we do encourage you to use the chat window. So if there's anything that comes up, Pam has kindly volunteered to let us know, and we'll redirect us, let us know if there's any technical issues as well. And we'll do our best to help you. So to get us started, we'd like you, if you're so inclined, to share the place from where you are joining. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can scan using your phone, scan the QR code that's there, or I'm also going to be putting the Padlet link right into the chat window. And I'm going to do that right now. So again, if this is not visible or if it's not working, try it a second time, a third time. And if it's still not working for you, please kindly just let us know in the chat window, what place are you joining us from?
We might need to zoom out, Julianna. We only have Ontario here in the picture.
Okay, I'm working here. So Betty, if you can just let me know, is the map visible in front of us?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. So I invite you to use this pink circle in the top where there is a cross, I guess, or a letter T. And if you do so, fill it out, and you're essentially adding your PIN to where you are joining us from. And this is amazing. This is, live information right here.
In Aurelia. There were some people in Peterborough, I think. Oh, someone's in Manitoba. Welcome. Welcome, 3 people from Alberta. Welcome, British Columbia. Oh, somebody's in Nova Scotia. Wonderful. Welcome.
This is amazing. I'm getting chills, Betty. I'm getting chills. Yeah. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit more to see, do we have anyone from outside North America? And the system's fighting with me for a bit. So
I think
at this point we're looking at
a good cross section of Canada.
Thank you. It's super exciting.
Yeah, welcome everybody.
Thank you. And I'll just shift it over here. And Betty, can you let me know, are we visible on the screen?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Thank you. And just as you're filling in your last pins, we appreciate it. And it's always interesting and wonderful to chat and see and make some connections to the place where we're presenting from. So I'm currently coming to you live from my basement in Mississauga. Betty, where are you coming to from?
I'm in my my little office space here in Bolton, Ontario.
So both of us just a little bit north and west of the actual downtown of the Toronto area. Betty, how'd you get into eco-education?
So my path to this space with the walking curriculum started by way of many years of leading eco teams and realizing that the kids were always happiest when they were outdoors and appreciating their surroundings, showing concern for areas of degradation if they saw them, and pollution, and wanting to pitch in. So as this year, and for quite a few years, I've been a planning time and a core French teacher. But this year, particularly with COVID being at its most threatening when we've been inside buildings, I've wanted to take the children outside. So I realized that teaching outdoors would be the safest and the most ideal teaching space for all my classes. And I do teach multiple classes. So with the help of Gillian Judson's walking curriculum, Learning for Sustainable Future, the COEO, is that how you pronounced it earlier? COEO. I joined a mentoring cafe which was specifically designed for outdoor teachers, and many other resources. I've learned that teaching outdoors is actually an ideal location for all years, for all time, and I recommend it for everyone.
So for myself, I recognize the privilege opportunities I had as a child attending family cottage, actually a little bit north of Aurelia, and heading out to the campground. So I recognize what a wonderful opportunity my parents gave me. And I definitely think for myself that put me in touch with nature at a young age. One of my earliest memories is actually working on an environmental themed magazine in my grade 8 class. This is 1992. And I remember introducing my peers to ideas of veganism, endangered species, climate change, and they looked at me like I was speaking to them in a foreign language. Here we are, 2021, and all of these things are still on our mind. We've come a long way, but we still have a far way to go. As a longtime primary teacher and recent full-day kindergarten teacher, this passion for nature education continues to move into all parts of my life. I work hard to impart this love of the environment for my own children, my students, my colleagues. And I sit as co-chair of the ISSSPC Council for my school board, Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board, which is a group of eco leads that are working on the eco schools application. And where all volunteers come together, share our love of the environment and for environmental education. And I really do thank the council and each and every eco lead coordinator that I've met over the years for sharing their gifts and their passions with me. It really keeps me going. So the next slide we wanted to share was just to orientate you a little bit to the place of which we are speaking to. And this is just a very simple map of the University of Toronto, St. George campus, right in the heart of downtown Toronto. If you know the area, or if you don't, we do have an underground subway system called the TTC, Toronto Transit Commission, I believe. And so a landmark here would be right in the north, St. George. And this highlighted area here is the University of Toronto. And right beside, we also have OISE, which is the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, in case anyone's ever been there or knows that as another landmark. So Betty and I, we did actually meet. We went down around Christmas time in December to go for a walk and see, what areas spoke to us. What did we feel a connection to? And we had each read the guide before, Gillian Judson's guide, ahead of time. So we sort of had an idea of what we were looking for. And I think for anyone planning a walk for a first time, it would be helpful to use her guide. She also shares a lot of free walks on her own blog. So, if you're not able to purchase the guide, there is a lot of free information out there. And it's really become quite a following now, and a lot of people sharing free ideas of things that they've been able to adapt and use. So in terms of the way we approach this is we thought the area known as the Philosopher's Walk seemed like a natural starting point. So here we started in the north, walked south along that Philosopher's Walk, visited the amphitheater, which we'll speak to in the next slide, and then headed all the way down. So if you know this area here, you have the government of Ontario, and heading all the way south, this takes you down to that hospitals area. And we weaved our way all the way back, heading north past the Robarts Library, and then back up to our starting spot, which was near that St. George subway station. As we're walking, we really found it important to think about and recognize who was in this place before we were. And we came to the Philosopher's Walk amphitheater, and we did see a sign there. So the information that we're going to share is coming directly from the plaque. And it stated, well before European settlers arrived, the natural ravine, now known as the Philosopher's Walk, was likely a gathering place for the Anishinaabe people, the Mississauga Ojibwe. And furthermore, it states during the spring, the stream that once ran through the site would have been teeming with wildlife. Native fishermen would have lined the banks with gill nets and fishing weirs to partake of this bounty. For them, according to what is stated on the plaque, the stream would have been a sacred place, a sacred site, a place of powerful and audible spirits. So as we were walking, we really found it important to think about which lens we were viewing this place from. And Betty's going to speak to this a little bit more. Betty?
Yeah. So when Julianna and I met at the University of Toronto back in December, we set out to find as many applications of using Gillian Judson's work throughout the campuses that we could find. So we chose several different walks that reflected typical sites that a person could see within an urban setting. Of course, there's some that are very particular to University of Toronto. And within any built environment, similar thematic walks can be followed for any school group when led by a prepared leader. So within any particular space, certain walks will be undeniably more relevant, and you and your students or your group of walkers will be able to recognize what those particularities are and what makes your space, your place unique.
So without further ado, we were walking, we were snapping pictures, and we started to notice it was a wet day. This is, keep in mind, this is a December day. Normally, you know, lots and lots of snow, but it was very late that day, and we really started to notice some like visible signs of water, but then also spots where water would definitely be running and evidence of that. And then we also really were interested to see the grates that had been put on top of the drainage and how that became art pieces in itself. And we also started to notice, you know, what are the sewer systems? What are the systems that are lurking underneath that are helping to deal with excess water and drainage and that sort of thing. And we also wanted to know more about these blue markings. So on page 20, if you're following along in your guide or taking notes, or snap a picture of this slide with your phone, we really like the wet world, the dry world, and wanted to know more about that, and thought that it was something that could go across the different grade levels or within different groups. So looking for wet world examples and dry world examples.
Yeah. And if you could go back to that slide, Julianna,
Sure.
for a second. I had just attended Jeff Stickney's workshop a couple hours back, and he pointed out that this whole section of the Philosopher's Walk was actually a river. And so this is why the amphitheater is so important. It reminds people that this was a riverbed. And this is why you see the sloping. This is why the grates are so important, because actually that water system is still running underneath the campus and then out into other branches of Toronto. And he pointed out that, you know, looking at a larger map of the area, you can still see where that river flows based on how people's, like how housing and buildings were put in. So this is a really significant walk for the University of Toronto.
And I know, Betty, you and I, in our discovery or in our research in the discovery of this area, we did find out that U of T itself, if you just visit their website, they do have a lot of maps that they've put together, and they'll highlight a lot of different points. So even if you're working remotely, virtually, you could still do a field trip, so to speak, and still visit the campus area here in those ways.
Lots you can find research-wise. Yeah, so another great walk for the University of Toronto is called the Texture Walk, which you can find in Gillian's book on page 29. We found these are 4 different samples in this one photo here of different textures found on campus. So natural textures, of course, that would be grasses and barks. Human-made textures, there's marble here. You can also see this blue is the flooring of the sports area. Maybe someone who knows the campus better than can put in the chat what that big white dome is, and it has this blue flooring all around it. So there's visual textures and there's stone textures. Also, it's a great idea to have some things on hand when you take a walk, notebooks and pencils, so you can take notes, paper and crayons if you'd like the kids to do rubbings. Cameras are great, you get lots of amazing photos. Of course, the senses of sight and touch are the most relevant. With the sense of touch, you'll want to be mindful of keeping the kids' hands sanitized in case, you know, there are COVID germs, etc. Don't want to think about that. But and finally, just collecting vocab. So again, that's when the notebooks come in handy. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So the lettering walk is also a great walk to take. It's on page 30 in the guide. You can find embossed letters, for example, on signs that are telling the story of a certain place or about a certain person. You can find engraved letters. Here you see some that are showing the Roman numerals of the date when the building was erected. There's lettering that tells stories of who the building is honoring or in memory of. There's just signs that tell you about certain people that were important to the area in historical times. And then there's signs telling you more about the natural aspects of of the campus, trees and plants, etc. And many, many signs, because it's a city, just telling you which way you should go, shouldn't go, where you are, location signs.
And for anyone who's never been down the campus, it literally major downtown streets are heading through the campus. So it's definitely a busy, busy urban place.
Mhm.
Found objects?
Yeah, so found objects walk, that one comes in many shapes and forms too. We find this one on page 20 in her guide. So this theme is great. It can take on many forms. It could be based on a garbage walk if you're looking for the kids at a time when you feel comfortable again. But getting the kids collecting garbage, those are found objects, and discussing what you're finding. It could be based on art installations that you find. And of course, at University of Toronto, there's many of those. It could be based on the fruits, seeds, needles, and leaves that are dropped by the many kinds of trees, which is what you see here. This is a collection that I found on campus. It could also be based on any theme that the kids come up with. So they may decide, let's look for things that start with the letter P, or let's look for green objects, let's look for flat objects or tall objects, or man-made objects, or historical objects, or objects that may possibly still be here in 300 years' time.
So the next section is themes to try based on her resource. And these we organize by division and by age group.
So the Become a Flock walk, which is explained on page 39, can be a lot of fun. Julianna will give you a personal reference to it, but I would recommend doing this one out in a field. It's particularly relevant now that we're in COVID and we need to keep our 6 feet away from each other, or 2 meters away from each other. So just setting up your group in a big open space, if possible, just to practice. And once you get good at it, you can head off into different places in the community. But the idea is that everybody stays a certain distance away from each other, and they all head in one direction. And at some point you need to change direction, and you all pivot and off you go in the new direction, but still maintaining your distance.
And teaching kindergarten in Ontario, we have a full day kindergarten program. I felt like I definitely was doing the Become a Flock walk most days, just trying to get the kids in a line, get the kids away from the cars, in my school. So yeah, I definitely felt like intentionally or unintentionally, I was doing this most days, but we'll get there. We'll get there. The next walk we wanted to introduce you to, again, organized by division or age group, is for you to consider these walks for students in the early years. And again, these walks can even be done by lots of different age groups, but just, in terms of if preparing and wanting to give you something that you could take away and use tomorrow, next week, that sort of thing, we thought you might want to consider some of these walks. Because of the age of the University of Toronto downtown, lots of big, beautiful trees. And so you might want to consider what's an overhead walk. And again, this is a great one to try in lots of different seasons because the trees themselves will change. And you might consider the what's underfoot. So this was one of those on the top greats that we found, which was an art piece really in itself. And another one you might want to consider is the vertical world walk. And if you know the area, or if you don't, this is Robarts Library, one of the largest libraries on campus, and it really towers high to the sky. So I could see many students being very interested in that. Betty, did you want to add a point about the vertical walk?
Just in terms of that, the idea says that children notice things at their eye level, but when you call them to look, upwards and see what is going up. For example, the tree you see or the Robarts building here, both of them cause the kids to notice what's above them. And it's funny. I go in a bookstore regularly here in Bolton, like pre-COVID. Now it's just, but she has all these umbrellas hanging from the ceiling. And I have been in and out of that store so many times, and it was finally like, at some point I said, "Oh, look at these umbrellas." And she says, "They've been there for 3 years." So it is important to get us to look up once in a while. There's a number of other walks that would be great for the early years. So there's surface walks. motion walks, line walks. And I did a line walk the other day just in my community. And I couldn't stop finding lines no matter from the minute I left my home and the minute I got back. There's buildings and there's roads and there's even within trees you can even see on the bark of this tree there are lines that you can follow up the course of the tree. So there's rockin' walks, which would be looking for rocks, and then neighbor walks, so getting to know who your neighbors are, and so on. So
And you can
many
see just having even just in terms of being an educator, having a little bit of time to go through the guide, it just really prepares you for when you get out there, because it's not just a neighborhood walk. And I think of some parents thinking like, oh, here, you're taking my kids out for a neighborhood walk, but once you start being able to share, well, we're actually looking for this, and this is how it's connected to the curriculum. And, look at this line walk. This is, relates to what we're learning in art. It just makes the experience much more richer. Betty, can you tell us about primary and junior?
Yeah, so primary and junior, any of those previous walks might work. You could find a way to make it interesting, but these ones are particularly great for this age group. So the weathered walk is just going out there, exploring your community or your schoolyard in different types of weather. The lovely and unlovely walk, realizing that it's a subjective thing, what one person considers lovely and unlovely, and then compared to what another person might think. There's the feeling rooted walk and starting to realize that, although most trees, we can only see them from their base up, there's a whole root system below. And when you find an opportunity to see that, any part of that root system, it's quite amazing. The hiding places walk, well, the obvious thing is kids would think of where they could hide, but then you get them thinking, where would an animal hide? Where would an insect hide? And making that, and they get very creative in finding those places. And then there's the water walk. Again, we did that wet world, dry world walk earlier on. And we also noticed that because this is a place where water exists, where does it flow to? And just getting connected to that. If you can take your kids to a pond or to a river, there's so much to explore there. And then we wanted to connect to literature. So The Water Walker, written by Joanne Robertson, tells the story of Josephine Mandamin and how she did walk the periphery of all of our Great Lakes, initially by herself, but eventually with many, many others. And she really brought to the attention how we need to preserve and protect our water. So these are some walks you could take with intermediate and senior years kids. The walking walk, which is where you actually focus on the fact of you walking and what that means in a community. The mental health walk, so again, finding places that would inspire health, mental health and safer places of being and existing. The Hearing Beyond the Names walk, again, University of Toronto was great for that because there are so many named buildings and named streets, and you don't always know the history of who those people are. So this is a great way to become familiar with them. The Human Impact walk, again, noticing what changes have happened over time because humans have been through this neighborhood, this area. The Systems walk, just getting to know what kinds of systems are in place, especially in an urban area, to make that place function. And then the Understanding Community walk. Again, seeing how your community is built and understanding what's important about it. There's a term now I could introduce which applies to older kids and adults. The French have this word, the flâneur, and Gillian Judson mentions it in her book. And it literally means the passionate walker. So the whole point of these walks, especially as you get into the older groups, is just to enjoy the walk and be out there and be fully present in your walking.
So recognizing that many of us are coming from across the country and are not only dealing with school-age children or high school students, and we wanted to make sure that we included some walks for adults and those who are leading maybe seniors groups. So one of the ones we wanted to highlight was the walkability walk, and this walk considers political engagement. the service walk, which considers community engagement, and the I walk, which considers artistic inspirations that come from expressing yourself as a walker in a theatrical sense.
Mm.
And particularly, we found this picture at the top here interesting, and I'll put my pointer on. And you may be aware that the Badashoom Museum also resides right on the property. And Betty and I were saying what a great connection that is to walking. But all of the pictures here that are sort of fashioned like flowers and maybe angels' wings are actually all shoes.
Mhm. Yeah, something you really need when you're going for a walk.
So as promised, we wanted to give you some time to plan out one of the walks you might be willing to try tomorrow with your family, or on Monday, or next week, or in Ontario, we do have a lockdown. So maybe this is going to be when we return back to school. But Betty's going to tell us some of the things that we need to consider when we're planning our walk.
Okay, so these are the considerations you'd like to be thinking of. So number one is planning and considering the accessibility of your walk. So you need to think about who's in your group, what are their needs, how far can they go. For example, kindergarten, you wouldn't want to push them to go too far. If it's an elders group, you'd again want to consider the distance. And okay, we'll go to the next one. So the permissions, you need to seek permission from the people themselves, from the parents within a school community, and definitely from your administration. You'd want to outline your expectations because you'd want everybody in line with what your idea of what's the purpose of your walk. So again, choosing a theme from Gillian's book, going over it with the kids in advance, and setting up the stage. So you'll need to set the tone. So the tone hopefully is enthusiasm, and you want the kids, even in the bad weather days, you'd like them to consider that this is going to be fun, and let them know that it's an outward looking experience. It's not just about having a conversation with their friend beside them, but bring that conversation to be looking at what they see in their community. You'll need to decide what to bring. So earlier we talked about notebooks and cameras, crayons, and whatever you think your group is going to need for that particular walk.
And even weather considerations too, Betty.
I think that's coming up.
Yeah. How to dress.
How to dress, right? How to dress, yeah. And actually, going back to the what to bring, later on, we'll talk about something called a sit-upon. Actually, no, we have a sit spot, but a sit-upon is a great thing to bring. So some small pad or small piece of foam or even a plastic bag. If you carry it crumpled up in your pocket and you want to sit down somewhere, you have it handy, you can sit down. So again, how to dress, you're thinking about the weather, you're thinking about the comfort of the children, whether or not to bring sunblock, hats, and that kind of thing, and what kind of footwear you want the kids to be wearing. Okay. And finally, you're going to take your walk. So these are important things to consider, questions. So ask yourself, what are your own walking opportunities? What's in your neighborhood? What will make your walk more accessible? If there's anything you can change about it, and who is in your walking group? We mentioned that. You'll want to consider how you will encourage your students to mindfully discover their surroundings, no matter the setting. So even if it's the same setting, we'll talk about that later. And finally, what questions do you still have in planning your walks? If you have any questions, this is, I think, a time that we can bring those up.
So what we'd ask you to do, if you're comfortable, is to think of a walk or two that you can share. We're going to set up the Padlet again. If it's not working, try it maybe 1 or 2 times. And if it's still not working, feel free to use the chat window. So I'm just going to set that up for us. Pam, is there anything coming out in the chat?
Absolutely. Sorry. Yep. Could you comment on how well these activities would work in different communities? One was specifically thinking prairies, in farm communities, or, along rural roads, perhaps.
That's a great question. We did more or less focus here on the urban environment because that was the theme of the conference. But in an in a country setting, which is where I grew up, just walking along the road and looking for, you could look for signs of life, like looking for little animals, little insects along the road. You could find different things that are growing in your community, what types of grasses are growing. You could also, do some measuring activities and see how many steps is it from this farm lane to that farm lane. And just looking, if you find your sit spot somewhere out, again, it's nice to be there in different seasons. Oh, I like all these ideas. You'd want to, spend some time, let the kids look up at the sky, look up at the clouds. They always love to do that anyway and see what's up there. Of course, more ideas might be popping in here in our little sticky note form. Julianna was going to explain how to use it, but you
Sure.
figured that out pretty quickly.
In case anybody's stuck, again, just look for this pink little circle with this T cross there, and then you can add yourself a little post-it note. So the one I added was, I do teach kindergarten, as I mentioned, and it's great to take the students on an alphanumeric walk, looking around the school, looking at those signs, looking on the ground, and the students love it. So that's something I would be wanting to do when I reach back with my own students into the classroom. Betty, what kind of walk do you like?
Well, I'm just looking the one about around a pond. And yes, earlier I talked about how taking your kids to a body of water is so enriching. I love that idea. And it's, again, you definitely one you can do in a rural setting. Sorry. I like
a sound walk. Sound walk too. Space walk.
Mm-hmm.
I can make a difference walk.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's great. Walks along the river and even the urban neighborhood. Yeah, I love that.
Thank you.
A texture walk and a human impact walk. Yeah, great.
Symmetry, looking for math. Yep, that's.
I want to become a flaneur. I think we all do. I love that. Signs of spring. Yeah. And the walkability walk. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The small
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Looking for small things. And then even comparing that to looking for large things and, doing different focuses, looking for tiny differences, anthills, flowers. And it's nice, again, at the outdoor store where we recommended you get the book, they have a whole bunch of things to take that you can buy for outdoor teaching. For example, magnifying glasses and binoculars. So if you have access to any funds, I think it's a good place to check out and see what they have.
Also, someone mentioned about forming relationships with the place. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do if you're in such a relationship with your place and you're only limited to just staying in that one spot. So Betty, I think just to honor the time, to make sure that we're able to attend those closing ceremonies, I'm going to move on, but we thank you for your contributions and your suggestions here. Yeah, it's exciting. I feel the energy.
Yeah,
I feel the energy.
It's so good. So we're going to talk about debriefing and how to extend the learning after you come back from your walk. So you ask yourselves and you ask your kids what went well. You'll want to ask, what did today's walk lead you to wonder? Because that's a great place, a jumping off spot for so much curriculum. You'll ask, what did you see that you weren't expecting? There's always surprises. And what were you disappointed to have not seen? There's always a few disappointments. Okay, so you'll want to use the learning and the images and the memories from your walk when you're doing lessons in math, in language, in science, and social studies, and so on. There's so many points where you can refer back to the walk and say, remember we saw this, etc. And finally, you should start planning your next walk and which theme you'd like to pull out of the book next. Whether it's from the book or not, you can go beyond that too.
And Betty, I don't know if you felt the same, sometimes like when we're planning that first walk, it's such a big to do and before you know it, something's come up and there's an assembly or an announcement or something has changed it. So I think, thinking and being flexible and having lots of different ideas in mind, you can see even within yourselves as an educator, you'll start to build your repertoire here, of all these different kind of walks, and you'll be able to pivot as time goes on. And
Yeah.
your students, as Betty mentioned, will be able to look back and say, yeah, that was a really great walk, or maybe I didn't really feel as connected. Maybe my own state of being or my own mental health of that day I wasn't reaching the point that you had wanted me to reach.
And this is why you want to consult your groups and get the best ideas on how to move forward. So go ahead, Juliana.
So if you're stuck in that same setting and the permissions and just all different things are just too much to bear, we just recommend starting small. Be comfortable first in your own, and over time, and this is a process. And even I think Judson alludes to it in her book, and just in the different webinars that Betty and I have heard from her, it's a process. It's something that will come with time. So Betty will let you know what a sit spot is.
Yeah, so sit spots are just any spot that the kids choose. So once you've gone on, you don't even have to leave the schoolyard. You can choose sit spots right within the schoolyard. But even if you do go on a walk and you find there's a good natural kind of a resting place on that walk, allow the kids to choose a certain spot, and they'll pull out their sit-upon or their plastic bag, whatever they've got handy to sit down on, and just take in their environment. Just look in different directions from that one little spot. Look down, look in the grass, see what's beside, right beside them sitting on the ground. Have them look up and just daydream, look up at the sky, enjoy the moment, enjoy the spot.
So in that, choose a different focus. Maybe you're going out and it's math time, or you're the math teacher, and you're going to introduce them to the math around their school. So choosing different focuses can also help break up some of the monotony that the same setting might present. Try a different time of day. I know with my own students, we usually went that block just before lunchtime, but it would be great to go first thing in the morning or just before the end of the day and see what looks different, what looks the same. Try different weather and try different times of year. It's great to be able to visit, adopt a tree and visit it at different times of the year, different seasons, and again, note similarities and differences. So we've reached the question part, and we'll try our best. Pam, if you want to let us know if there's any questions that have come up since.
Absolutely. So far, we're good.
Okay.
I do actually have a question. You're obviously working with younger learners from your own experience, but do you think your learners would be able to collaboratively design their own walk?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, great question. Oh, I think they would have to get out there a couple of times, but definitely when we're out there, they were noticing things that I hadn't even dreamed of. And I think it goes back to what Betty was saying about their line of vision. My line of vision is up here. They're here and they're looking in different directions. And the things they noticed were things that I had not even had even any conception about. So yeah, definitely. They can be the narrators, the organizers of their own walks.
Yeah, I like what Bonnie just wrote, new eyes in old spaces. So it's all about, and it's kind of nice to do your planning inside, because you never know what they're going to come up with. And then you go out and you actually apply it. You say, okay, well, here's our idea for the day, and just see how it works. And if you have 2 or 3 ideas in your back pocket, if one of the kids' ideas is only getting you so far, you pull out, okay, let's focus on what so and so said. And you can switch, halfway through, because you can just call it a kid focus walk, right? That's your theme of the day.
Maybe a second question from myself. Do you find that these walks build their ability to ask better questions?
Yeah, some more than others, right? Some of them will get them very introspective. Like if you do have a chance to take a walk near a pond or a river, there's going to be so much opportunity for them to explore something new and fresh about that space. And it brings insights. I hope we have Judy here. Yeah, Judy Halpern is a wonderful person from LSF, and in her mentoring cafe that I attended, we have a friend named Jessica, and Jessica takes her kids on a regular walk I think it's every Wednesday, out to a forested area near a river. And the stories that she comes, you get chills, you're tingling by the time you're finished hearing what her students are doing, because they're in such a rich environment. And really they've taken it quite to a deep level, you know. Even her children that have difficulty with regular schooling. This is kind of the nice thing about getting the kids outside. You see them flourish in ways that you wouldn't have known if you had only kept them within those four walls. So,
Judy, you want to add to that? I notice you're unmuted.
Sorry, I was just going to say that absolutely, it's all in the debrief though, right? It's all in how you set it up before, as all those suggestions that you guys mentioned are so important. And then what do you do with that afterwards? Because you're right, the kids are out there every day. So, and I think Bonnie said it too, old eyes, new, whatever you said, old eyes, new places, right? You're giving them a focus, and that really just helps them see the same old in a whole new light. So I think your ideas have been fabulous. Thanks.
Thank you.
thanks, Judy.
And I'm really glad you said tingling, not tingling, not tickling, or oh my gosh.
I think it was tingling.
So Betty and I, we want to extend the walking curriculum challenge to everyone who's registered here, and to your colleagues, your teammates, and take note of this date, May 3rd. The walking curriculum is going outside for 30 days, May 3rd to June 11th. And fun fact, the first walking curriculum took place in 1990. I mean, 2019 had only 51 participants. And I know Gillian Judson, she is working hard to try and get 1,000 teachers registered. And I last check, it was just over 500. So we still have time. Joined lots and lots of free information on her website, her blog. Take a look, and I'll post this in the chat as well.
Super. And we've got probably time for one more question, which I see two in the chat. One is, do you usually take students off school property? And if so, how often? And then, of course, those of us who are teaching virtually, have you tried virtual? So I guess off property and then virtually.
For myself, I've only had one opportunity this year because of COVID. To actually take the kids off on a walk, and it was a great walk. We did an excellent, we had a great experience. Last year without COVID, we went every Wednesday, so I took them, and we went in a different direction every time. We pulled a different theme up every time, and it was great because I don't live right near the school. I live kind of close by, but it was getting to know that community better. And even the kids were exploring and saying, oh, that's my friend's house, and this is this and this is that. So they really enjoyed it.
I know for us, we are blessed in our school. Our yard extends right into a bit of a park area. So, we've had the permission form signed in terms of a walking field trip. So we do extend, and our full day kindergarten class also has another adult in the room, our designated early childhood educator. So we are within ratio all the time. We do have another friend who is closer down to the Lake Ontario side, and if you know that area, Port Credit. And what she was able to do was one of her students required an ERW, or educational resource worker. So they were able to keep within the ratios, get the permission forms, and then go a little bit further. But I think what she mentioned is always having those open lines of communication with the parents, letting the parents know, and she found that a lot of the parents wanted to join, and they were able to take work off for an hour or so and just go down to that area that many had lived in for most of their life, and learn a little bit more too. So that's that. So in terms of virtual, this is the the next chapter. I know Betty and myself, we both belong to the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board, and what we're going to try and do is take that walking curriculum challenge we've issued to all of you and try to issue it to our own colleagues, and doing it virtually just because we have the lockdown here in the school. So that's something we're going to be working on this upcoming week, and seeing, how can we honor the different unique situations that our students are in, many of them living in urban areas or some areas where parents are unable to take them out. So we're going to be working through it. If there's any ideas, please, we open the chat for you to post in there. Just while we're doing that, if you are taking part in the Ontario not the Ontario, but the Eco Schools Canada application, don't forget you can claim 5 points for your professional development action card. And Betty also kindly put together a resource list for us. So I will post the link, which I think I have already in the chat, or you can use a QR code.
Yep, and we are out of time, but just before we leave, there is a request to change the permissions to access the resource list. It is 4:21. You have given us both concrete steps in terms of literally walking us through, giving us examples, linking it to the book, but also offering so many ways we can access this material. So again, before we leave, if you'd like to hold the chat, we don't send that chat to you, but we will have the recording available. So do take a copy of the chat, which is using those dots at the bottom.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at 4:30 at the Ecom Awards and Conference closing. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. We really appreciate your time. Take care.